Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Retro Gamers Podcast, episode 367. Anthony here, and as you can tell, Larry is not here this week. He is off running around enjoying WrestleMania weekend, which is why he has abandoned me. But I got not one, but two more than suitable replacements and first-timers on the podcast. I want you guys to say hello to John and Jonathan. Guys, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for
having
having
us.
Yeah, no, really appreciate you guys stepping in. This has actually kind of been a little bit of a long time coming. We met back in August at the Long Island Retro Gaming Expo, which Larry has been going to for years, and that was I think my second expo because at the time I was living in LA, so I wasn't really flying in for it. But by happenstance, Larry told me about your table in the back. And he told me you guys were selling PCs, which was exactly what I came to buy at the expo that year. And not only was that just a great happenstance, but the fact that I was moving to the Albany area and that's where you guys came from, it was just kind of like a perfect symbiosis type of thing.
Magical.
So, yeah, it really was. It was one of those things where it's like, okay, this is awesome. I now know two people that live in this area, which basically that's everybody I know here. So So welcome to the show. If you guys just want to I just want to again just get this started, very basic stuff. So how do you two know each other?
John, you want to take this one or you want me to take it?
Yeah, we basically met by accident. I responded to a Craigslist ad of John looking for some old computer parts because I run a recycling business and I come across that sort of thing. And I think it was a year later he actually responded to the email.
I think it was like two. It was terrible.
Yeah. So that's basically it, and we've been in contact ever since. So
very nice. John,
Yeah.
what took 2 years?
So he sent an email. I for whatever reason, I never saw it because I get so much spam, and I guess I just missed it. And one day I was searching for something else, and I did a search, and I saw this email from him. Like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I missed this. This was like 2 years ago. So yeah, and thankfully he replied to my response 2 years late, which goes to tell you a lot about how great John is.
All right, that's awesome. And so, how long have you guys known each other then?
It's been a few years.
Been a few years. All right.
Before COVID?
Yeah.
Was it before COVID, John?
Yeah.
All right.
Yes.
So like 4 years.
So all right, before the world shut down. Nice.
Yeah.
All right, cool. And then I'm gonna go into, obviously, we're here to talk retro gaming, and judging by your background, John, we're definitely gonna talk some PC stuff for sure. Ignore those noises because I forgot to silence my phone, which is a rookie mistake on my part. But yeah, dig in your background, Jonathan, I like the simple background too. Sometimes those are the best. Also, I can kind of green screen it if you want, and I'll throw something.
Oh, I'm in my man cave, which John can attest is about 75 square feet, and I'll turn my computer around for a moment so you can see the chaos.
All right.
But
chaos indeed.
Yeah, it's very big piles of stuff everywhere. I don't have the room that he has to set my computers up, but
yeah. Well, you know what? I've seen all of John's space, which by the way is very impressive. I think if you hire him as like an interior designer, he will really like max out your 75 square feet.
Yeah,
I've offered.
At this point I'm going up. We're going vertical.
Yeah.
That's how it has to be.
Hey, whatever works, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So John, I'm going to start with you really quickly on this question, but what got you into gaming? Go all the way back, earliest memories. Where did it start for you? And I'll give Jonathan time to come up with an answer.
Okay. So for me, in 1982 or 83, we got an Atari 2600. So that was kind of my first break into gaming. I was really young. I was probably 5 or 6 when we got it. My brother hogged it most of the time, like older brothers do. And I do remember playing. I played an awful lot of Jungle Hunt and I think Montezuma's Revenge, maybe. And then the awful port of Pac-Man. It's funny because everyone said how terrible that port is, but frankly, the fact that you had Pac-Man in any way, shape, or form back then was pretty amazing.
Mhm.
But most of my memories weren't necessarily playing a 2600 at that point. It was going with my brother to the arcades. At that point, we lived in South Texas. So the arcades were a huge thing by 83, 84. And we'd play games like Tron, and Moon Patrol was probably my favorite game as a kid. I still like
Nice.
playing that. I play that on the Atari 8-bit, the 8-bit computer that Atari put out. Has a great port of Moon Patrol. I'd recommend people try that if they really like Moon Patrol. Much better than a 2600 version. Not that that's terrible. So those are my earliest kind of memories. But then we kind of put the 2600 away, and my family didn't have a lot of money. So my dad ended up with a boring IBM, which didn't have any games. It was a laptop, convertible IBM convertible. I say laptop. The thing was massive,
I was gonna say
and
that 30-pound laptop probably.
it was huge. It had a thermal printer attached to it.
Oh
It was
geez.
a non-backlit monochrome, very weirdly proportioned screen. It was terrible, terrible. You couldn't play games on it. Text Adventure probably would have worked, but I didn't know about them at the time. So I wasn't playing Zork when I probably could have, and I would have loved that.
Yeah,
Um,
Zork came to me at a much later time too.
oh man, I missed it.
I think my first text-based game was actually The Incredible Hulk.
Oh wow! Oh, that's an
Yeah.
infamously bad game too. You liked it?
As a kid, I liked it because I was a big comic
Yeah,
book fan. So
sure.
like, oh, cool, it's a comic book game. I was like, sure.
Well, what a lot of people forget, if you get one of these games on Incredible Hulk or like Paragon Software, I think for the PC in particular, and probably for the Commodore, made a bunch of superhero
Par
themed games.
Paragon right
There
here.
you go.
I got my
I see it.
I got my Punisher and I got my X-Men one right over here.
Right. They weren't, if you look at them now, you say, oh, these games aren't that great. But what people
Yeah,
forget was you didn't have a lot of options back then. And even a not great game with a superhero in it was amazing.
yeah.
So, especially if you could play it at home, of course the arcades were better. But again, people that didn't grow up in that time don't realize the hardware we had to work with at home was
Hmm.
obviously going to be inferior to what was in the arcades. So, those superhero themed games I was always amazed by. But I digress. We didn't really do a lot of gaming. I got a Nintendo Entertainment System, but again, we were poor, so we had the system, and the only games we had were really the pack-in, track and field, Duck Hunt, and
Hmm.
Mario. Played the heck out of those, and we would rent from a local video store. Essentially, we would be renting our games. So I remember playing a lot of Mega Man and Chippendales Rescue Rangers,
Ah, Chip and
and
Dale.
oh, great! I loved that game.
It was a
So
fun game.
it was a great game. Those Capcom games, that I think they hold up pretty well. I've got a number of them now. And then I didn't really get into gaming until high school, like 1991, when we got a Packard Bell 46, a low end 46.
Mm.
And by that point, the deficiencies of the IBM hardware, which were pretty significant compared to the competitors, like there were no hardware sprites built into IBM, the IBM platform. So like you look at a Commodore 64 or you look at an Atari 8-bit computer, the MSX, they had all these little helper chips that were helping to push pretty amazing graphics and sound. The IBMs, unless you spent a ton of money, there was no sound. It was just a one voice beeper speaker. There were
Oh
no
yeah.
hardware sprites. So most PC games in the 80s looked terrible. And it really wasn't until the late 286, 386 era, they were able to kind of brute force some of those limitations. We started getting some accelerated 2D graphics cards. I won't go into great detail. I'm sorry, but my point is the PC gaming really wasn't exciting. And even looking back at it now, there's some exceptions, but generally speaking, most of those games that I enjoy started at like 88, 89 when EGA 16 color graphics. And I'd
Yeah.
say the one exception would be Tandy graphics. Tandy had a phenomenal IBM PC Junior knockoff called the 1000, and the Junior was a failure, but it had 16 colors. But my formative memories, I had friends that had this stuff, and John was in a similar boat. I won't speak for Jonathan, but he'll tell you his story. Neither of us had families with a lot of money, so it was pretty late. Even though I'm almost 47, it was pretty late into like the early to mid 90s before I really got into gaming because I had to get a job and pay for the stuff on my
Right.
own. My parents weren't going to give it to me. And so now John and I are gobbling up a lot of the games and hardware that we would read about in magazines and drool over, our friends would have, and we were just jealous of. I'm speaking for myself. I was certainly jealous of, but my parents were no way going to buy me an Amiga or a Commodore
Mhm.
64 or an Atari computer. So it wasn't until the 90s, and that's when I really, really got into PC gaming. And the reason, and you'll hear this from a lot of people, that the PC gaming grabbed me is because, again, not a lot of money. Piracy was was rampant. So I mean, I got into the Sierra games and stuff,
Yep.
and some of the RPGs, and my buddies would copy stuff on discs and we hand them around, or we download them from local BBSs, which you could have a whole episode on BBSs. But that's, in a nutshell, a very long nutshell, what got me into gaming.
All right. That was a good nutshell. So, all right, Jonathan, I'm going to turn it over to you. Where did it begin?
Yeah, so for context, I'm 10 years younger than John. I'll be 37.
Hmm.
So my formative years were in the 90s. And
I'm
you know,
jealous.
so yeah. So while I was aware of computers, you know, and our school had a computer lab with an Apple II and Apple Macs, which at the time were dead because we're talking, you know, 95.
Oh yeah. Oh geez.
Well, it was an inner city school, so we had what
Okay.
we had. Um, you know, I was lucky enough to have cousins that were 10 years older than me, so I got their hand-me-down NESs and Genesises. I had all that stuff. And the Game Boy was big for me because, you know, being babysat during school vacations and stuff, I got to play Visual Cue, Ultima, like Runes of Virtue. You know, I
Nice.
used to play the crap out of that. And I remember the first time I saw the PS1, the babysitter's son, who was probably in his late 20s at the time, he was playing Tomb Raider, and I was just blown
Oh
away by
yeah.
the polygons. I'm like, you can do backflips in a cave with guns and shoot dinosaurs. I'm like, what is this? That's when really things took off for me, the PS1 era. You know, I can go into great detail about, you know, 96 to 98 being the best years for video games. You know, Resident Evil, Armored Core, you
Oh
know, Metal
yeah.
Gear Solid. Um,
Well,
and there was,
and you were right at the right age for Lara Croft to make an impact on you.
you know,
All the
not even,
polygons in the right spots.
and not even that. It's just, it opened the door. You know, I remember going to the, you know, our local grocery store. They had a video rental section, and seeing, you know, Cloud on the cover of Final Fantasy VII. I'm like, what is this?
Oh yeah.
You know, and that just, the doors blew open for me in the mid 90s.
Yeah.
But that's where I'm at.
Yeah, and PS1, I mean, PS1 probably would have been like, especially for your age, like that was like the definitive console of the 90s to really get you into gaming. I was, I'm closer to John's age, so I was already like when PS1 came out, I was already like, at the end of high school about to start college type of thing.
Yep.
So when the PS1 came out, I had a part-time job at like a video store, which was like the perfect job to have if you're a gamer, because games would come in and I'd be like, whoops, I'm just gonna put this one on the side for me to take home for the day. I would bring my Sony PlayStation to work with me because in a video
It's
store,
low.
it was like
Yeah.
it was a local video store, not like a Blockbuster or anything. So like it was me by myself in the video store, and there were a lot of lulls throughout the day. So I had my PlayStation hooked up. I would be playing that thing all day long. And it
Yep.
was amazing. Absolutely amazing. And Tomb Raider, absolutely fell in love with. Did you buy the remastered ones on Switch?
I did not. I do have a Switch at home. That's our main console now. And
Hmm.
with kids, it's, you know, my son
Hmm.
plays the crap out of Zelda Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. And I
Oh
think we have
yeah.
800 hours in Breath of the Wild, which is insane
Wow.
between the two of us.
I thought I think I hit 110 on that on my own, and I thought that was a lot. So
No,
you
he
guys
uses
would,
my
wow.
account, so between the two consoles, it's combined like 800 hours, legitimately.
Jeez. Yeah, I'm almost at the end of Tears of the Kingdom now, and I'm just absolutely loving it. So just a masterpiece, both of those games. But all right, cool. So PlayStation for you, Atari 2600 for you, like that's what I'm getting from like way back in the beginning. My first one was also a 2600, John.
Nice.
But unlike having a brother, I had two sisters, so it wasn't that bad. It wasn't that bad for me on the sibling front. I had to fight my parents for time to play because
What were they playing?
they were obsessed with, both of my parents, my mom and my dad were obsessed with asteroids. They loved
Oh,
asteroids to
we
no
played
end.
a lot of that.
Yep. And my dad, aside from asteroids, his other two of choice were Berserk and Missile Command. He used to play those nonstop.
Berserk
Actually,
is incredible.
Berserk I love. Berserk I absolutely love.
That really holds up.
It does. And actually, I think last year for Christmas, I bought my mom that, I forgot what it was, like the Atari Gold system with like 100 some odd Atari games on it because she loves
Yep.
asteroids so much. So now, like, even now in her 70s, she's still playing the Atari 2600.
Your
So
parents sound pretty cool.
no, they were really cool. They were really cool. You know, it wasn't like, you know, we didn't live in a house that had like a ton of money, but like they always made sure I had a game for my birthday, so there was always something. But otherwise, it was the video store. Like we had a video store around the corner. We had one a couple blocks away, so there was a lot of rentals. Captain Video, I remember specifically, got a lot of our money from rentals.
You,
A local place in Brooklyn.
We had
you know,
a
the
Mr. Video in
Mr.
our town.
Video. What about you, John? Same or other?
Yeah, we had little podunk local video games, video rental stores. You know, I remember as a kid, I mean, again, in the 80s in particular, we were pretty poor. Things were better off, I think, for us in the 90s, but in the 80s, we didn't have a VCR. We had a black and white 10-inch TV. And if we wanted, like, we were sick, the big treat was my mom would go to the rental store and you'd get this like
Mm.
briefcase for $5 and you'd rent the VCR.
Oh
Um,
yeah, I remember that.
and it'd come with like one or two movie choices, and that was such a big deal. There's things that I think that this generation, everything's so instant gratification. Like you got a Game Pass, which gives you access to hundreds of games, and
Mhm.
Netflix, and boy, it so different. And we lived and died, I think, especially when I was in junior high and high school, by video game magazines like that. Frankly, that was my jam because there was, you
Mhm.
know, we didn't have the internet really until college practically. I mean, as far as accessible to the average person, the
Yeah.
World Wide Web. And so those magazines, that's so like now I'm chasing a lot of those memories. And I think John is too.
Yeah.
I mean, John, did you get a lot, Jonathan, did you get a lot of magazines when you were a kid, or you flip through them at the store?
Yeah, yeah, and I, could only dream about an $8,000 computer because you got to remember computers back in the '90s. If you wanted extra memory, that it cost you 2 grand.
Oh, it was
Um,
insane.
so you get these full blown computer setups that were $8,000 to $10,000, and it's like my parents can't afford an $80
Hmm.
used PlayStation, so that's out the window. I can only look at it.
Yeah,
Um,
I remember saving up for my first PC. I think it was a HP, a Hewlett Packard,
yeah,
and it was like I think it was like almost 3 grand. Nowadays, like those things would go for like maybe 200. Like
yeah,
it's amazing how much it's changed. But like yeah, for like 3 grand, you just had like you had a nice setup with Windows like 3.1, 95 if you were fancy when it finally came out. But yeah, it was just amazing how expensive they were back then. And
and
I used that thing to death. Like I had that for 5 or 6 years. It was so outdated by the time I had, I got my next computer. But that, it's like you spend that much on a computer, you you're sticking with it for a while.
and the irony is, as John previously mentioned, is that you look at these Alienware computers and you're like, oh my God, this thing is sexy, right in the year
Hmm.
2000. And now they come in for recycling for free, and we tear them apart, and it's
Not Alienware, but yeah.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
We'd
But
probably save an Alienware, wouldn't we, John?
well, it depends, but
Just
you get
just
what
in
I'm
a
saying.
just a big old box, right?
Yeah,
Huge. Yeah, the early 2000s. I mean, John and I see these ridiculous computers come in, and I mean, we haven't gotten to the point where we're talking about Jonathan's business, but um, one of the goals, you always hear reduce, reuse, reuse, recycle, and I think all that people tend to really focus on is that last one, recycle,
Mm.
right? We're so heavy on the consumer end. We're not reducing our consumption of things, and John and I could easily attest to that just based on what we see come through. And the reuse part is pretty horrific. And so one of the aims of John's business, I'm speaking for Jonathan now here. You can tell me to shut up, John, but is to sideline things that clearly shouldn't be recycled, right? Because there's a whole community of people out there that are looking for these things, and they're looking for them on eBay a lot of times, and people are just charging insane amounts of money. So
Hmm.
we sideline these things. I spend a lot of time fixing these things, John does as well, and we find new homes for much less than what you would buy these things on eBay.
Yeah.
All that
And
stuff you saw at the expo, Anthony, was largely stuff that came in for recycling.
yeah, and I was going to say I can attest to that because when I was at the expo looking for a PC, and I came up to you guys and I was talking to you, I honestly thought when I asked, like, oh, this is the type of, I'm looking for a PC like that has like Windows 98, whatever, just to play my old games because I still have them. I was expecting to spend a good amount of money because of the pricing you see on eBay and stuff like that. So I'm like, all right. And I was, when you guys threw a number out at me, I was almost like shocked. I'm like, I go, is that it? Are you sure? And you were like, yeah. And I'm like, all right, great. I was like, and I
There's
have, and I'm so happy that I have it because again, I'm not I'm not the person who's going to turn around and sell it on eBay for like, double or triple the price. It's sitting in my home. I turn it on, I play it. By the way, boots up faster than any computer you use today because it has nothing on it. It has no malware software, anti-malware, has nothing that it needs to boot up. It just turns on. It's great.
And you're the kind of guy that, frankly, that we're looking to get the stuff in the hands. Like John can tell you a quick story as an example of the type of people that we don't want to.
the guy with the jacket.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, we can get into that guy.
All right. Well, I mean, we're already talking about your business, so let's talk about it again. I'll just throw it out. It's called Capital Region Electronics Recycling, right?
Yep.
All right. So yeah, so let's keep talking about that. All right. Tell us the guy you don't want buying your stuff.
Right. So, obviously, John was saying we want to keep this stuff alive. We want to keep it. We want to get it into the hands of people that are going to use it, or expose their children into what they played in the '90s or in the '80s. That's the kind of thing we want to see. We ran into a gentleman at the expo. I didn't catch his name, but we'll just call him the weird jacket guy.
Okay. Weird jacket
We
guy.
had a Commodore monitor, and this man came up and told us all about how he collects them and he hoards them, and he's got about 56 of them in a storage unit somewhere. And his ultimate goal was to have them all so that nobody else could have them. And to us, it was like, why?
That's not
If
fun.
you
Yeah.
if you want to have
Yeah.
10 and you have 10 setups, that's cool. But why just buy them just to buy them? So I ended up selling it the next day to a guy with his son. He wanted to get back into retro gaming. I said, I'm selling it to you. I'll bring it out to your car. And sure enough, the jacket guy came around, saw that the monitor was missing, and he had a
He
meltdown.
laid into me. He was
Really?
pissed.
He was
Well,
pissed.
I mean, but why didn't he buy it when he first came over to you? Like what was his
Well,
delay?
we were using it as a display.
Oh, okay.
And so we told him, maybe at the end of the show we'll sell it to you, but
Got
come
it.
back tomorrow, we'll talk. But his story just didn't sit right with me, and I think John can agree to that as well. But yeah,
I've never been happier to disappoint somebody.
yeah,
Nice. Well said. And you know what though? I think I think that's actually like I think that's a great thing because you do want these things to go into good homes and you want to sell them to somebody that is going to enjoy it. There's no fun in somebody buying it and it's like, oh, I'm going to stick it in a storage unit. I'm going to flip this on eBay and make a ton of money type of thing. I was like, there's no fun in that at all. So
no,
yeah,
I
no,
mean,
I think.
John's got a business, right? He has to make money to keep the doors open. He has to
Mhm.
rent the warehouse space and everything. But I mean, we're also at the same time, both of us, very passionate about vintage gaming, vintage computing,
Mhm.
and we want to make sure it's affordable for people because, frankly, it's an amazing hobby that should not make you go broke. Like, and
Yeah.
there's strategies. And I talked to you about this the other day. I'm putting something together that outlines strategies for building a usable collection, not a collection like the guy who just wants a hoard, a usable collection that's not going to break the bank. And I've
Mhm.
got a number of strategies that I've employed, that John's employed, that at another time I'd love to share. But I mean, this is a hobby that John and I are both passionate about. We want as many people into this as possible. Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, we run into some things too. Like we have a connection down in Rhode Island, the Rhode Island Computer Museum, And every once in a while, we'll trade some gear with them. And every time we go down there, we're in awe of this, Indiana Jones warehouse of just parts and parts and parts.
Oh,
And
wow.
some of it's organized, some of it isn't, but we could just spend a month in there, if given the opportunity. And as awe-inspiring as it is to see stuff like that, it adds to the problem because
Mm,
this man has a 30,000 square foot warehouse of all these usable parts that could be out, in the
being
open.
used. Yeah.
So,
All right. Well, but it's nice though that like, you're doing your part with it. And I think it's actually a very important part and probably something that not that many people do. So I think it's just, a testament to you. And I also think you guys were both talking about it earlier, but I also think like not growing up, being able to like just readily afford these things, I'm also sure like plays into that because you are looking out for other people who are like you want you want to sell stuff to people who, like I said, who generally can't afford to buy all these markups and things like that, and people who are really going to appreciate it. And that's, and that's one of the most important things about gaming to me. It's the fact that you appreciate it. It's like like I've held on to most of my original consoles my entire life. I've never parted with them, and it's not because I want to hoard them. It's because I love them, and I
right.
always love them. And whenever I get the opportunity, I will, as long as they still turn on, I turn them on and I play them. So
Yep.
yeah, so I really think that's awesome. Is there anything else about your business that you wanna talk about? Like what is the general like day to day with that? Is it just people coming in or you like seek out?
So, it's been legitimate for the past 2.5, 3 years now. Um, and we serve upstate New York, so I don't know how relevant this is going to be for most people listening to the podcast, but um, you know, once it was, the LLC was formed and it was open. I mean, we get people off the street, we get businesses calling us, we get towns calling us, counties, and then this time of year through, let's say October, we do outdoor events, so people can just drive up, give us their obsolete computers or whatever, and drive away. And it's um, part of it is the treasure hunt, right? Like I think I selfishly, subconsciously started this just to be able to find old stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the time we're getting Dell Optiplexes, right? But every once in a while you get a nice Tandy 1000 or something.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, those Optiplexes.
yeah,
I see
yeah, a
those
ton of,
everywhere.
they're everywhere.
Yeah.
The sad part is 10 years from now, the kids are going to be like, hey man, I want a vintage Windows Vista computer. And I'll be like, oh my God,
Why?
I've torn down 3,000 of these. Um,
Yep.
so,
Oh,
but yeah, it's
speaking
it,
of, I told John earlier that when I finally see you guys in person, I have a laptop for you. So
all right. Yeah.
yeah, I just gotta get my stickers off it.
You don't even have to do that.
No, but I want them. I want to keep them.
Okay.
I
Okay.
want to keep them if I can. They
So
probably won't pull off.
one aspect of John's business is the how we actually get the computers in other people's hands, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I basically work as kind of a volunteer symbiotically with John. Um, and I look through the equipment that we put aside. Sometimes I have to fix things. I'll do very basic board repairs. I'm a C minus at board repair probably. And I almost never put things on eBay for John. I'll market them for John on Facebook user groups. And
Mm-hmm.
the reason I like that is because, frankly, it's a great community. The user groups that we're in, Vintage Computer Sales, I think, is one. They have thousands of members, and frankly, it's so much more personable. You can actually talk to people in a way that's it's just friendlier than eBay. They still have all the same protections and stuff because we use PayPal exclusively, and but the great thing about it is I've developed, and John, great relationships with people over the years that are frankly really good friends now. Case in point, like there's a guy, he runs a YouTube channel, IBM Museum. His name is David Beam. If you ever have an IBM specific question, David Beam knows everything about IBM.
Okay.
I think he was on Ardent Tool is one of the websites. If you want to know about old IBM stuff, you have questions, schematics, drivers that you go to. And I think he's one of the, either it's his website or he's one of the administrators there. But anyway, point is, he bought some from me one time. Now, over the years, we've gone back and forth. We've talked on the phone. You know, he's helped me out with parts before that I've needed to repair, like a childhood IBM that I had as a kid that I reacquired. These people, the community is awesome. So I'm happy to sell to these people and get them what they want. And again, we're not beating them up over prices. And frankly, most of the time, the people that we routinely sell to, they say, how much is it? I'm like, well, just send me a fair price, you know. And sometimes they're just overly generous. They'll be like, no, let's settle down. Generally, we're at half of what eBay sells for.
Wow.
Is about where we end up.
And that's amazing.
And at the end of the day, we don't mind letting it go for, you know, a couple bucks, because more stuff is just going to come in, you know,
right.
And that's,
well, you have that steady flow. Yeah.
Steady flow, you know, whereas people might not see a Tandy 1000, you know, I have, you know, for example, no fewer than like 10 of them in my garage right now.
Wow.
And so it's
okay.
just,
I have a friend, Jack, who comes on the show sometimes. He's my tech. He's basically my tech guy. He's the one who will take apart everything and mod everything. He's probably drooling listening to this show or watching this show right now, because he's like you guys. He's exactly like you guys. He loves to get a hold of these things. He loves to fix them and, you know, just and play them. So I may have to do an introduction at some point in the future with you guys.
Tell him to stop over anytime.
Yeah, I will definitely let him know. He already knows about he may have come up to your table at the expo. I'm not 100% sure. No, he didn't make the expo, but I bought
the Atari. Right?
I bought the Atari for him from you guys. Was it the ST?
Oh yeah, the ST.
Yeah,
right.
I bought the ST for him because when he saw that and he heard the price, he was like, "Oh," he's like, "Really?" He's like, "Are you sure?" And I said, "Yeah, that's what they told me." So, and he was, yeah, he absolutely loves it. So, I'm gonna have to do some introductions there at some point in the future. But getting back to just to switch gears a little bit now, talking about your gaming collection, since you say you get the steady flow in, let's talk about some of your stuff. I mean, John, we can see some of the stuff right behind you, just sitting there, and absolutely love it. What's behind you right now?
Let's see. This is an Atari 800 XL. It's an 8-bit Atari computer with 60. Well, actually, it's upgraded. This has 256K of RAM.
Nice.
And that's a Commodore 128.
Ooh.
Which was like the end of the line for the Commodore 64. And the main difference is it adds a Z80 processor and 128K of RAM. And it has kind of a turbo mode as well. So not many games took advantage of it because it came out so late. I have an MSX2, which a lot of Nintendo Entertainment System games actually kind of started out on. It's a Z80 based computer that was exclusive to Japan. I have a TI 99 4A. I've got Coleco Atom computer that was actually made in Amsterdam, real close.
Wow, it's just endless what you have. It really is. There's for those of you watching on YouTube, there's a nice little 360 view. Yeah, well, that's an entire episode by itself. We're gonna have to like plan an episode just to like go through these, but it's just absolutely impressive. What you have in terms of though your collection. Are there any like what is like your most prized possession in there? And Jonathan, I'll get to you on that.
That's really tough, and and frankly, again, it would be a whole episode where I talk about how to collect without going broke, like I mentioned. I started this about 3 years ago. I've acquired everything in the last 3 years, and a combination of luck and trading up and I've acquired a lot of neat stuff. Some locally, some of it had to buy. The Japanese stuff, I typically have to go to eBay or a Japanese site. And frankly, my MSX2, oh geez, that's probably one of my most prized collection items here. I'm more of a hardware guy than game guy. Like, I'm really big into the history and kind of how these machines came to be. And I love machines that failed Sometimes machines that failed weren't bad machines. It's just
Okay.
bad marketing, like the Amiga.
Oh,
John's got,
very important
yeah,
question
oh,
though
for sure.
about failed systems. Do you support the Virtual Boy?
I had
Um,
one.
I had one
I
too.
asked this because Larry and I have a thing where we go back and forth because he loves the Virtual Boy and I tease him about it like almost every episode.
Larry's
Um,
right. It's a great system that
I'm
unfortunately
sorry to
had some
hear that.
technical problems. You can play it on a 3DS now.
John, I'm sorry you're breaking up. We can't hear you anymore.
Oh, no, you can play it. They emulate them on a 3DS now, and apparently on a new 3DS it looks great.
Yeah.
With an emulator. And it was a great idea, a little ahead of his time and some half-baked hardware. Um, yeah, I like a failed system. What can I say? I like an underdog.
All right. Well, we'll agree to disagree on that one point. Jonathan, over to you.
On the Virtual Boy, so my rich aunt, at the time she had money. I asked for one for Christmas. She got me one, I think, in
Wow.
1995 when it came out.
Nice.
And one of the like rare exceptions, I actually got something I wanted. And I set the thing up, and I think I had like 3 games, like Red Alert, Tolero Boxer, and like Mario Tennis. And
Oh wow.
the one with the ship there, Red Alert, I think it was called. I used to play the crap out of that, and I used to get headaches pretty frequently, and that, after about 10 minutes of strapping that to your eyeballs,
Hmm.
I'd be out of commission for the day because I would just have,
Wow.
See, it never bothered me.
immeasurable head pain.
Yeah.
Yeah. And therein lies one of the many, many problems with that thing.
Yeah. Yep. Just
Well,
the acres and acres of red.
Uh-huh.
Just yeah, after a few minutes of that, you're done. But
uh, come on. I could see that. It never bothered me, the 3D. And if you have
Mm.
one now, I can tell you it's not going to work. The capacitors have leaked. It's bad. However, George Portugal from One Up Restorations repairs them, and he does a
Okay.
great job. Yeah,
All right,
if
cool.
you happen to find one.
Well, Larry has Larry technically has two. One of them was kind of we did this years ago, and you'll hate me for it. I won a bet, and he got me one, and I gave it back to him for his birthday, but after I took a jigsaw to it.
What?
Yeah.
What is wrong with you?
It was a little birthday gift from me to him. Small part of me hates myself for doing it, but at the same time, it was a little worth it. It was cathartic for me. Going back to the Jonathan, prized possession for you. Like if there's one thing that you feel like is something that you have that's really special.
yeah, it's hard to say. Like John said, it's hard to pinpoint. If we're talking speciality, is it nostalgia or is it value?
Yeah, good point.
For me, yeah, for me,
I go nostalgia every time. I never go value.
yeah, I've retained most of my collection from childhood as well, like you. So I have a lot of PS1 games and stuff that's a little bit going back from that. I do have a very nice SX64 that is kind of like
Oh
museum
wow.
quality. But speaking of failed systems, let me just bring you over to my
Uh-oh.
Franklin.
The Franklin.
Yeah, this is my go-to sort of Apple II unit.
Oh wow. Okay.
Um, as you can see, my stuff is a little bit more eclectic than John's. I do like software as opposed to hardware, although I do have a fair bit of hardware as well. Um, I just like weird in general.
Okay.
So
That's fair.
to be fair. So if I see something odd, I'll pick it up or save it. A lot of manuals and stuff like that too. Just really oddball stuff.
All right. That's cool.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that. No, I was, for some odd reason, the Apple Pippin popped in my head for some
The
reason.
Pippin, yeah.
Yes. There's a failed system.
Yeah.
We have not come across one of those in the wild yet.
Really?
But I feel
Okay.
like it may happen, but it's up there with like the Atari Falcon. Like the probability is pretty low.
Yeah, probably, but like you said, you never know.
You never know.
That's my
Yeah.
white whale. That's my white whale, the Atari Falcon.
Oh, the Falcon is your white whale? Okay.
Yeah.
We did get a Silicon graphics computer not that long ago. At
Wow.
the very end of one of our events, some guy pulled up and we're like, "Oh, here we go." And he had a Silicon graphics What model was it, John? Do you remember? Was it the Onyx?
No, I'm trying to remember. I have it off camera here somewhere. Indigo.
Indigo.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
But that was the one and only time we ever found one of those, and probably never again. But
But that's okay because you got one, right?
it's up there with the.
A next cube would be nice.
I was just gonna say it's up
Ooh.
there with the next cube.
Yeah.
Wow. All
Next,
right.
for those who don't know, is when Steve Jobs was fired from Apple. He left and started his own computer company, Next, and it was a pretty interesting architecture. And when Apple started to fall apart terribly, and they begged him back, basically, he brought all the IP from Next with him, and OS 10 came from the Next operating system.
Okay.
So if you can get a Next, it's kind of a neat system because it's kind of like a proto OS 10 OS.
All right. And I'm assuming very, very few are out there.
Not too many. No.
Yeah, they were pretty expensive.
All right.
They're workstations.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, hey, you never know. You know,
Yeah.
again, it's one of those things where you never know because things always just pop up out of the blue. One of the I'm gonna switch gears a little bit again because I know you guys had talked to me about this when we were at the expo, and I wanted to bring it up here too. But based on all of your collecting, there was an interest on your parts to maybe eventually open your own type of gaming museum. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yeah. So what do you envision like happening with that? Or like is it just one of those goals like you're constantly working on until you get there?
We have been discussing
Yeah.
it for several years now, and we have some other people on board. One of whom just recently backed out for health reasons.
I'm
So
sorry to hear that.
yeah, she'll be okay, but she needs to focus on that than deal with a
Health,
museum
health is first. Yes.
and so we're still in the planning phase of how we want to do it and who's going to be on the board and paperwork stuff. That's sort of essential when you want to run a nonprofit.
Yeah.
And we want to make it open, and accessible for everyone without fees. So
Nice.
that would mean that we also have to secure grants and take in donations and things like that. So that's part of the planning, and we also need a location. So suitable location is key. Lots of
Yeah.
parking, things like that. So that's where we're at. But I think both of us are envisioning just setting up our extra units and having a room with lecturers and have a rotating sort of what do you want to call it, a lectures, I don't know, things like that. And
Yeah,
that's
like an educational space.
educational space.
Yeah. All right.
um
That's cool.
yeah, and
So,
kind of
yeah.
we're here in upstate New York. I mean, we're close to RPI, and
Yeah.
the tech sector is kind of booming in this area now, or about to be. So we have a lot of I think a lot of interested parties that would want to be involved. So here in like the Troy, New York area.
Nice. It's a shame you're not closer to Vegas since they seem to be building stadiums and museums for like everything.
Right. Yeah.
So the goal really is to make it interactive. I don't want the museum to be behind glass, everything behind glass, and you just kind of walk in, read placards. I mean, there'll be some of that, but I want the museum to be focused on microcomputers. Like there's other museums, and they'll pull out, mini computers, which aren't actually small. Mini computers
Mhm.
were titled that because they were much smaller than mainframes, but they're still the size of like a giant stand-up freezer, maybe a couple of them. And there's museums that focus on those, like PDP-11s and VAX computers, and we don't want to focus on that. We want to make this engaging for young people. Young people don't care about PDP-11s. It's not that I don't find it interesting personally, and it's important, but I want our museum to be focused on engaging young people, or at least people younger than me, and kind of the history and the use of vintage computers. And there's no better way to grab a young person than games. So that's the hook. But like Jonathan was saying, we'd like to have maybe some programming classes taught, get people to volunteer their time. We have a number of universities in the area. There's State University of New York and Albany. You've got Siena College. You have RPI. There's the Nanotech School. There's a lot of tech hub here. You got Global Foundries is a massive chip fab company that planted themselves here like 10 years ago, 8 years ago. There's a lot of tech here. There's a lot of potential volunteers. So it'd be great to have volunteers come in and teach classes in programming and robotics, maybe even some basic game design. And really, again, the hook is gaming, I think.
Yeah.
And the focus would be microcomputers. And by microcomputers, I mean consumer computers like what you see in my room here. And generally, it would be from 76, 77, about when all the microcomputer revolution started, to computers maybe in the early 2000s. But, frankly, computers get pretty boring and kind of ubiquitous after 2000, and very, everyone's used a post 2000 PC. They're not that different.
Well, you
No.
know, like XP, John?
I love XP, but the museum probably wouldn't focus very heavily on that. And like Jonathan was saying, we also want it to be free. We want, to find ways. And now New York State, the capital, is actually in Albany here, which is convenient. And the state has a lot of real estate that's empty. So my dream would be to convince someone with authority in New York State government to provide some space for us to use. Of course, like Jonathan was saying, the first step is to set up the nonprofit, and we just have to get off our butts. We need to find a lawyer and get that process rolling, because once we have that in place, then it's a lot easier to go to the state or to like Global Foundries or these other companies ask for donations, either in hardware or in cash, to kind of help this thing along. Because if we have to charge an entry fee to get in, it's going to fail.
Yeah, it's a big barrier to entry. So
yeah. Well, no, I mean, that all sounds amazing. It really does. And I can guarantee you that if, I move around a lot, but provided I'm still living here, you'll definitely have one person popping in there all the time.
Well, I told you we have a vintage computer user group that I started. It's pretty small, but it's growing, and we meet once a month. So, like, if any of your listeners are in the upstate New York area, not too far from Albany, about once a month. For now, it's held at my house, but we've held it a couple times at a local library as well. And people bring kind of like show and tell items, some old, some new devices for these old machines, and we kind of talk about them. We play with them, play some games, kind of talk about the history of things, eat pizza, whatever. It's pretty enjoyable. So obviously
general nerd stuff.
General nerd stuff. Sounds right up my alley. I am a general nerd. That is a good way to define me. All right. I'm gonna put you both on the spot again.
Nice.
One more time. And I want to know if you have to pick one game as your favorite game of all time. Doesn't have to be PC, it can be console. What game is that going to be? And I'm going to go to Jonathan first.
Oh,
yeah.
Well, I thought about this a little bit.
Yep. Yeah, I know. I did prep you guys and tell you about this ahead of time.
So generally, I'm a big fan of survival horror.
You and me.
But
Yes,
I'm gonna go off the rails a little bit because I could talk to you forever about Resident Evil and Sweet Home and whatever.
Oh, Sweet Home.
Sweet Home, yeah. No Resident Evil without Sweet Home, right?
That's true. Yeah.
Clock Tower was also a great game.
One of my favorite games.
Dead of the Brain. You guys play Dead of the Brain?
I did not play that one.
No.
Oh, it's incredible.
All right. Clock Tower is one of my favorites. I absolutely loved that game.
But I have a soft spot for big robots.
Okay.
And so one of the first games that I ever played for the PlayStation, because my dad picked it up for me at the pawn shop, because again, we were broke. I got 3 games initially with it. One was some NBA game, which who cares? I got Bushido Blade, but I also got Armored Core.
Armored Core. Yeah, you had mentioned that one earlier.
So just something about customization, I mean,
okay.
the gameplay, when you go back and play it today, you're like, this game sucks, right? But something about the customization and just the gameplay itself,
right.
just flying around. And as an alternative, when you add in the strategy element, so you've got the customization with the robots, you've got turn-based combat. There's also a series called Front Mission.
Oh yeah, Front Mission. Okay.
Which the first couple of games didn't come to the US, but I think Front Mission 3 was the first one to come out.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I would lean heavily toward the Armored Core series.
All right. That's cool.
With yeah,
Yeah, I mean, and the whole thing is like this is it's a personal question. So, it's like to me, there's no wrong answer except the Virtual Boy. Um, so yeah, I think, yeah, all right. I think that's awesome. And also
I
it's like it's something you connect with from like when you first really fell in love with gaming.
yeah, and I would have a different answer if you asked me what is the most influential game. Um,
What do you think
if
the most influential game is then?
so, if you were going to ask me that, right? Again, if you're into post-apocalyptic, the Fallout series,
Okay.
great series of games, but you wouldn't have anything like that without Wasteland.
Wasteland. Yes.
So, brutally tough game. It wants to kill you,
Hmm.
but it has elements of, there's the survival. I mean, you've got four guys, two guns, and like three bullets to start the game, and a rat can kill you. Um, and so, Fallout was based on that. And then the kick-started Wasteland 2 and Wasteland 3
Hmm.
were also excellent games in the past couple of years.
All right.
If you like that sort of quirky, post-apocalyptic, just random stuff happening to you out in the wasteland, like I would definitely try Wasteland.
Well, who doesn't want to get killed by a rat?
Right.
All right, John, what about you? So favorite game?
Man, I would have, I didn't even know about Wasteland back in the day, but that would have
I
definitely
did
been my
not. Yeah, neither did I.
yeah, that came out. EA put that out in the 80s on the Apple II, the Commodore 64, and the IBM PC. Maybe others, but at least those three. I've got a couple copies. One I think for the 64 and the PC.
Hmm.
But I didn't have that. And I was a little late to PC gaming as well because we didn't get that Packard Bell 46 until I was in ninth grade. So that would have been 90 or 90, probably 91.
Hmm.
And for me, the game that gripped me, and it's not necessarily the best in the series, if I'm being honest, looking back, but I poured hours into, it would have to be Ultima 6. And I know a lot of your users may not be aware, or maybe they're aware of the Super Nintendo port, and the Super
Mm,
Nintendo
yep.
port is pretty terrible. I remember getting the Super Nintendo port on a PSP compilation disc that EA put out, I think, and being incredibly disappointed. It is nothing like the PC. So what made the PC great, first of all, is overhead isometric RPG, mouse driven with various icons. You'd really want to learn the keyboard shortcuts for combat and stuff to make things a little smoother. But that game was amazing. It had 256 colors. First, you can see behind me, that's Ultima 5, the poster from the
Oh yeah.
box. Yep. If you compare 5 to 6, graphically, it's like night and day. Up until 6, they were all programmed first on the Apple II. So
Oh
if you
wow.
want to know why those games as great as they were, because people laud Ultima 4 and 5, particularly for their stories and everything, and they're incredible, but the graphics are very primitive, is because they had the Apple II limitations to work with. So Ultima 6 was the first Ultima to be in 256 color VGA. There were some ports to the Atari ST and the Amiga, and I think there was one for the 64, which is incredible that they had anything remotely looking like this on a 64. I never played that one, but it was the first Ultima that was built really for the PC. It was pretty amazing for me at the time because it allowed me to go anywhere. It was complete open world. Everything that you could see, you can kind of pick up or manipulate. And your actions really had impact. There was a heavy focus on virtue. So doing bad things had bad results frequently. And that was kind of a little bit unique. I doubt they were the first game to do that, or series to do that, but that was such a heavy part. And it was also, there was a lot of social commentary in that game that really, I like a more nuanced story. Most of the
Mm.
RPGs at the time are like, the princess has been taken, you got to go find the princess, or here's the big bad, he wants to destroy the world, blah blah blah. So in the very beginning, you're the avatar, you're from this world, and occasionally Lord Britain or Lord British, he calls you to their land, and you go through a moon gate, and you're the avatar. You're the guy that's supposed to fix things whenever things go bad in Britannia. And so you go there, there's a moon gate appears, you go through it, the very intro of the game, and you're caught by these demonic looking things and put on an altar, and you see a knife coming down about ready to go into, and then your compatriots from previous games show up and they kill the gargoyles, is what they call them. And so the game thrusts you in this, the beginning, thinking, okay, these gargoyles, these demonic, and they look demonic, are the big bad and yada yada yada. But this isn't really a spoiler because the game's like 30 something years old, but
of course,
it turns out that it's not that they're the bad guys. It's there's a complete misunderstanding. And so the whole point of your game, even though you're developing all these powers, there's a lot of magic use, and you're leveling up your guys or whatever. I don't remember if they level up per se. It's been years since I played this, I'll be honest. Yeah, it's combat focused, but your goal is to bring peace between the gargoyles and humans there, even though you're being egged on to eradicate, like genocidally eradicate these gargoyles. So to me, all of that was fascinating, that you could go anywhere, you can manipulate anything, that virtue was important. I had to be very low key in how I played it because I was raised in a very evangelical home. And that opening, I knew, like, I'm glad I started that game before my parents were home. And I was very careful not to play it around them because, on the surface, it looked demonic.
Demonic. Yeah.
Which was metal. It was awesome. I loved it.
Those were the best games were always the ones your parents didn't like.
I will say that anyone listening to this that wants to give it a try, first of all, there's a YouTuber called Finntrovert, Finnntrovert. He did a review about a year ago on Ultima 6, and he did a great job. I'd recommend you watch Finntrovert's Ultima 6 review. And for people that don't necessarily want to dig out an old computer to play this, there is an open source engine called Nuvie, Nuvie. And I think they incorporated this in Scum VM, Scum, SCUMM. And Scum VM is like a front end to play hundreds of games from the 90s on modern machines. But the Nuvie interface offers a lot of quality of life updates to Ultima 6. So basically, you download Nuvie, you put the Ultima 6 files in it, and I'm sure you guys can find Ultima 6 somewhere. And you install this, and some of those quality of lives include like full screen, because
nice.
The interface in the original was like a third of your monitor was the actual gaming screen, and then you had like your little paper doll guy here. And they fixed all of this in Ultima 7 and made it full screen. You could pop things in and out. So it really, Nuvie turns Ultima 6 engine into a little more like Ultima 7. One other thing, the sound in Ultima 6, the music was phenomenal. MIDI music, if you're familiar with MIDI.
So I remember MIDI music very well.
Depends on your sound card, right? Yeah. So like if you have a good wavetable sound card, like a Roland MT32, that's really a sound source. It's not a card per se, but it sounds like real instruments. Or if you had an ad-lib, it's like an FM synthesis or something. Still amazing. But Ultima 6 had, unfortunately, all the sound effects for PC speaker. It's still totally worth playing. And the one exception I'll say is behind me, I don't know if you can see that computer, very beige-looking, boring-looking thing.
Yep.
That's a Japanese FM Towns 2. And that is a proprietary, but kind of based on PC hardware, Japanese computer. And the Ultima 6 port is incredible on that because, for one, it's all voice acted because it's on CD, and all of the voice actors are like just people that worked for the studio. So like Lord British, Richard Garriott, the designer of all these, did the voice to Lord British, and it's ridiculous. It's so bad it's good. And the sound effects, I believe they actually use the sound card, not. So if you want the premium, get that port, and I'm sure there's ways to play that virtually as well. But that's my pick. I wanted to say Eye of the Beholder. That was a great game.
Oh wow, Eye of the Beholder, yeah.
Yeah, I gotta go with Ultima 6.
Special shout out to if we're talking about voice acting, Shadows of Darkness, Quest for Glory 4.
Fantastic.
It was the first one to have voiceover, and it sounds like Boris Karloff is narrating the story.
Oh, that's so cool.
So Anthony, if you're into horror and that sort of thing, I would definitely check that out.
All
And
right,
also,
that's one I got to check out.
also the XCOM series.
Oh, of course. XCOM.
Definitely. I mean, if you're into a brutal challenge, play the PC version. But the remake, Enemy Unknown, is excellent if you're into strategy. Turn-based combat. There's nothing like shooting aliens. So
No, well, yeah, of course not. I mean, gotta love shooting aliens. The
the
summoning.
summoning, yeah.
I have to pitch this as well. A lot of people aren't familiar with this. It's called The Summoning. It was made by a company called Event Horizons and published by SSI, which SSI was just a massive publisher of RPGs in the 80s and 90s. They had the D&D license. So almost all the D&D games in the 80s were made by SSI. The Summoning is kind of like a proto Diablo. So, and this came out in 90, it's VGA, came out in 92, and it's incredible. It's mostly focused on, and it's a huge game, mostly focused on combat and exploration, very light on story, overhead isometric action RPG, and the music is fantastic. Highly recommended.
All right.
Not my favorite, but definitely in my top 5.
All right. Well, hey, if it's in your top 5, that's pretty solid. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
We're talking 40 years of gaming. So, all right, really, really cool. All right, this has been great, guys. Thank you so much for all of this. We're gonna head over to the end here, or we're gonna close up shop soon. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to put you on the spot just a little bit more and throw you guys a pop quiz.
Oh boy.
Yeah, because nothing makes you feel smarter than being able to answer a bunch of questions you don't know are coming at you. And I just realized a lot of my questions are firsts type of things, but I'm gonna hit you up with these. I'm gonna throw the first question to Jonathan, and we'll see if you can't answer this one. We'll hand it over to John. But first question. I've only got 5 questions. First one is, what is considered the first personal computer?
First personal computer.
First personal computer. The very first PC.
Geez. Well, I mean, in 1977, you had the Apple II, the Commodore PET, and the TRS-80. I guess it would be a toss-up of one of those, but then the IBM PC came out, the 5150, which sort of was branded, the first personal computer. So I guess it's speculative.
Okay. Incorrect. I'm going to toss it over to John. John, do you know the answer?
The first PC?
Yes.
So let me ask you a question. Are we talking colloquially personal computer or the actual copyrighted personal computer moniker?
I am not sure. I'm just talking about what the internet told me. But no. So this was decided. I'll give you a hint here, a little bit of a hint. But the Computer Museum in Boston asked this question in 1986, and the judges settled on the judges for that made the decision on what the first personal computer was.
Okay, so they're probably talking about the first microcomputer, I'm guessing then.
Okay.
That would be like, what was the one, Jonathan, that had the S100 bus? I never can think of it. It'd be another one. It'd be nice to have on my on the collection. I can't think of it. It has an S100 bus, but I can't think of the name of it. It's like MS something or other.
Well,
anyway.
According to the Computer Museum of Boston, the judges settled on John Blankenbaker's Kenbach 1 as the very first personal computer.
What year was this?
It was designed in 1971, before microprocessors were invented. It had
discrete logic.
It had 256 bytes of memory and featured small and medium scale integrated circuits on a single circuit board.
Wow, I didn't know that.
So
I'm gonna have to look that one up.
You're gonna have to look at it. It'll be on your shelf in like 2 weeks. So the so the Ken Bach one. All right, second question. I'm gonna throw it to John this time.
Uh-huh.
What was the first ESRB rated game?
Oh man.
I got this one.
All right, the
But
Entertainment Software Rating Board.
I wouldn't even know. I'm gonna let I want to say like Night Trap or something, but I'll let Jonathan do it.
Pass it over to John.
Yeah, Night
Jonathan,
Trap. Night
that is
Trap.
actually not correct.
No?
No, their very first rated game was Doom for the Sega 32X.
Oh man, we're doing
All right.
terrible, John.
Yeah, we're awful.
That's all right. That's all right. You know what? I never expect anybody to answer these correctly, and I'm always surprised when people do. But this is honestly the first time I really threw a quiz out at anybody. I've had quizzes thrown at me. Jo Jonathan,
Uh-oh.
what was the best-selling PC game between 1980 and 2000?
Oh,
Came out within that window.
interesting. Oh boy. I'm thinking of a bunch, but
If you had to pick just one.
give me a hint. Is it a because that's a big range. Are we talking mid 90s? Am I close?
I think you're close because, if you think about it, as time went on, people bought more PCs, so games would have been more, or
Yeah.
would have been purchased more. So you're in the ballpark.
I'm gonna wing it and say Half-Life, even though I'm
Okay.
probably not even close.
You're not. John, what do you think?
These are some brutally tough questions. I want to say missed.
You know what? I really wish it was Mist. No, Mist, I think sold about 6 million copies, but the reigning champion, again, according to my research, was The Sims.
Okay.
The
Are
Sims.
they including all of the add-ons?
No, the original one, 11 million. All the add-ons
Wow.
came, a lot of the add-ons came post 2000,
I could
actually.
see that because a lot of people that bought that, it cut across a lot of
Yeah.
groups of people, like non-gamers potentially
Yes.
bought that, junior high girls.
Yeah,
Not
well,
that there's anything wrong with that.
and some guys in college. I was obsessed with The Sims for about a year, and then I came to a realization. I'm like, the guy I'm playing as is living a better life than me, and that's when I put it down.
Were you playing Second Life too?
No, just The Sims.
Okay.
Your
Just
mind
The Sims.
your mind initially wants to go to like Doom, right? But then you remember
Now,
that it's mostly shareware,
and pirated.
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
pirated. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. All right, John, what was the first consumer CD-ROM device?
These questions are brutal. The first consumer CD-ROM device.
Mm-hmm. I'll throw a hint. It's a console.
Consumer CD, well, the first CD-ROM console, I want to say is the TurboGrafx CD.
That is correct.
Yeah.
That is correct. Do you
Yep.
remember the first games that came out on that, by the way?
On the CD, I
Yeah.
don't, but I remember the ones that came out on the Hue cards. Some of those left a little to be desired.
Yeah. So the actual very first CD-ROM games were obviously
Amazing Races?
no, it was Fighting Street.
Oof.
Oh, that's terrible.
I know, and Noriko, which was
Don't know
basically
that one.
Noriko was basically a story game about this Japanese like pop star or something like that. So it wasn't much of a game, but it was a game. And then the last question, which is kind of sort of related to the previous one, and Jonathan, I'm sorry. What was the first computer CD-ROM game?
Oh,
Hmm. Oh,
this is
man.
gonna be a tough one, man.
Yeah.
That's a tough.
I-
It is a tough one. I had no idea until I looked it up.
I can guess between two.
Okay, I'll give you two
Yeah.
options. You can have two answers. But
Yeah,
Jonathan, any idea?
I'm gonna be wildly off base. Like I said, I grew up in the early to mid 90s,
Yeah.
and it probably escaped me. Yeah, I'm not even going to venture a guess because it
All
would be
right.
wildly off base.
All right. We'll throw it to John. John, what do you think?
I mean, my heart wants to say Seventh Guest, but the tech in that was actually pretty decent.
Mhm.
So it was like the something project.
Journeyman Project?
Journeyman project, maybe?
No, it was a game called The Manhole, actually.
Ah,
Developed originally on floppy disk in 1988.
for the Mac, right?
In 89, they produced a CD-ROM version. Yeah, so that was the very first Cyan Inc. So very first CD-ROM game.
Nice.
We did terribly, John.
We did awful. Yeah, we're
That's
not winning that $1 million.
No, you know what? You got one. One out of 5, not bad.
That's terrible. That's failing.
I know. Well, you know what? It really is my first quiz, so maybe I'll dumb it down next time. I did delete one question of who invented the video game cartridge because I thought it was too easy. Do you have any idea?
He was an African American engineer, wasn't he?
Yes, he was.
I can't think of his
I
name.
can't think of his name either.
I never remember his name until I look it up. Jerry Lawson is his name.
There you go.
Jerry Lawson is his name.
It was for the Fairchild Channel F, right?
That is correct. Yep.
Yeah.
He worked for Fairchild. All
So
right.
make that a question. Channel F, first cartridge-based console. That would have been great.
That's the one I deleted. But you guys, this has been really great. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. This has been a lot of fun, and I really hope that you guys come back for another one. And I'm looking forward to actually meeting, actually hanging out with you guys in person since we're neighbors, kind of.
Yeah, definitely.
And if you guys want to give any shout outs, any links to your stuff, like
Okay.
What do you guys got, Jonathan?
Yeah, I mean, if anybody has anything to recycle, they can go to crerecycling.com or email me at the same moniker at Gmail. Anthony, feel free to post the email on your description of the podcast. And if anybody generally just wants to chat about vintage stuff, I'm sure John's on board too. Or if looking for a specific piece of equipment, I'm sure we could come up with something.
All right. Very cool.
Yeah, I mean, particularly if you're interested in like the original Pentium through Pentium 3, we get a fair amount of that stuff. A lot of gateway systems in particular, which are pretty iconic for that era. But for me personally, if you want to follow my musings and my ridiculous content related to vintage computing, you can find me on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it. I'm NY Vintage Micros. NY Vintage Micros.
Nice. All right, cool. And then as for our end on the Retro Gamers Podcast, you can find us on Facebook.com/Retro Gamers Podcast, on Instagram at Retro Gamers Podcast, on Twitter at Retro Gamers Pod. You can listen to us wherever you listen to podcasts. You can watch us on YouTube and Spotify at Retro Gamers Podcast, and you can email us at email@theretrogamers.com. Guys, again, one more time, thank you so much for being here this week. Larry will return next week. Yes, it was an absolute pleasure. So for everybody listening and watching, we will see you next week on the Retro Gamers Podcast.